If you've been using ClickUp to deliver large projects, chances are you're using ClickUp dependencies. And the thing is, if you deliver a project for a client and then duplicate that template for another one, it's most likely that not all the tasks in those dependencies are needed. Maybe out of those 10 tasks that you usually deliver to clients, for this specific one, you only have to deliver 9 or 8 of them. And you might want your dependencies to be reconnected automatically and your whole project planning to be rescheduled automatically. I'm going to show you a very concrete example here. We have 2 screenshots of 2 different projects, and the first one has 9 tasks to do. And these span over about 5 months. And they have dependencies, which means we can only close the next task if the previous one has been closed, basically. This is part of the Gantt view, and you can see it with the arrows. The Gantt view is definitely the best ClickUp view to handle your dependencies. And then if we move on to the second project, we have less tasks. We have 7 of them. So some of them have been deleted. For example, we don't have choose content themes. And the thing is, if I were to delete content theme selection for a client, these arrows will not link back to what's next. So if I delete this, maybe I want the account to become a dependency of set posting schedule. And maybe I want everything to be rescheduled accordingly. So if set posting scheduled is scheduled to later, it comes back to an earlier date. Basically, if I were to delete this, I want this to happen automatically. Now I'm gonna get to ClickUp and say we have this very project here. I can even put this one to start, say 1st of April. If I were to delete this, what this means is that this could start earlier, right? So we would have to bring it here. And the second thing is there should be a dependency that links account audit to set posting schedule, because there's no task in between and there is a dependency. So I want to link them back automatically. As you can see, you can do it manually. It takes about 5 seconds for each task, but imagine you have 10 clients, 10 projects, hundreds of tasks, and this can become quite tedious to do it manually, because basically each time you decide you're not going to do this, for example, you're going to have to delete it, and then you're going to have to link this back to whichever was the start date of the one that's been deleted, and then you're going to have to pick the arrow and everything. So quite complicated, quite cumbersome. And a client reached out to me and told me, I want this automated, Ramzi. So I understood their need, what they need very specifically, and we came up with an automation using make.com. Now, make.com is my favorite tool when it comes to software automation because it lets you connect any software as a service with any other one or any other software within itself. So you can basically create very complex ClickUp automations, but also connect ClickUp with Notion, with your CRM, with HubSpot, with any other software as a service that you might think of. And you might need to make ClickUp your central brain for most of your operating system, and then have it dispatch information and trigger other things happening somewhere else. So that's usually what I do with my clients when we set up ClickUp automations or any other software automations. Now, if you're interested into automating and speeding up your business, you can book a discovery call with me and we can understand how we can automate your operations and have make.com or any other automation software be leveraged so that your ClickUp operations or your connection between ClickUp or any other tool really have it automated, have it sped up so that you don't have to think about the repetitive tasks that you might have to do for your business. Now, with that said, let's get into what we need to do in make.com. Before diving into all these little bubbles, which can become quite technical very quickly, I'm going to show you how it looks on this diagram. So basically what we want is that if we have a set of tasks, task A, B, C, D, for example, and we delete one of them, so we delete the one in the middle, we want those links. So we want these very tasks A and C and D to be connected back. And we want the start date of C and D to take the start date of task B. So this is what this automation does. It basically finds out when we delete a task, hey, which one were waiting on this task, so C and D, and which one was blocking this task, it's task A, and let's link what was blocking to what was waiting on. And let's also reschedule what was waiting on. So basically I have a little diagram here that says we identify the deleted task, we analyze the dependencies, then if the task was waiting on, it goes into a slot and then it gets reconnected later. If a task is blocking, it gets into a slot and then it's reconnected later. And then we do a rescheduling. Now, what we are going to do from a technical perspective is have three operations. Number one, we're going to identify which ones we're waiting on. So those yellow tasks. Number two, we're going to identify which one we're blocking. So these purple tasks. And then we're going to put them into kind of like two different boxes. And B is deleted anyway. That's just the link that helps us find those waiting on and thus blocking. And then what we're going to do is link back those tasks. And I put a very particular case here. So we have task A, task B, task C, task D. I can even like make them here, so that's perfect. And here we have task C lasting maybe like 2 days and task D lasting maybe like 5 days. The thing is, if we delete task B, we want the duration, the time span of those waiting on tasks to remain the same, but we want them to start at the very beginning of task B. So we want them basically to be moved to the left so that they get closer to task A and they take the dependencies from task A. Like I showed you here, if we have a link here, competition research, and it could start like end of February, and this gets deleted, we would want this to last the exact same time. We don't want it to have the duration of the deleted task, and we would want this to get connected here. So doing this manually is possible, but we can automate it. And thanks to May.com, we can make this happen automatically in a blink of an eye. Now, this is just a very simple example of an automation that I set up for clients. I've set up plenty of ClickUp automations and make automations for clients. So if you're interested about these kinds of project automations or any connection with your CRM, with Go High Level, with Salesforce, with whichever need you have, we can connect ClickUp with any other tool for you at Upsys. Now, we're just going to have this very example, and I'm not going to dive into the technical details of how we did it for two reasons. Number one, it would be a 1.5 hour video, and we would have to be very, very detailed into every single step. It's quite long, it's quite tedious. There's a lot of logic behind it. And number two, I did this for a client. So I really don't want them to feel like them. And number two, I did this for a client. So there is a lot of intelligence put in there. And obviously, I can reuse and repeat those, but your need might be slightly different and there might be some little details and mishaps that you will not see in this technical implementation. And for your specific use case, what you might want might be very slightly different. So if you want something very specific for you and you're not able to do it yourself with this video or by inspiring yourself with what we can do with Make, you can just book a discovery call and we can get through it. But if you just want to get an idea of what is possible and maybe play with Make.com and fine-tune and tweak your own setup, please stay till the end of the video because you're going to understand how we can automatically link up and schedule dependencies in ClickUp with Make. First thing we're going to do. So you can see here, we have a very first module called Webhook. This basically catches any event that happens in ClickUp. And this is triggered by an automation happening in ClickUp. There's a link right there, okay? And I've used that link and put it in the ClickUp automation. So let's go back to ClickUp. What I said is basically in this folder, in Manage Automations, when a tag is added, and that tag is called archive, this is just a trigger. It could be anything really. It could be when a status is changed to archive, or a status is changed to deleted, or it could be when a custom field is changed. Basically, archive this task for me, so hide it. It's still gonna be there, it's gonna be hidden, and call the webhook that I've set up called ClickUp archived task. So to create a webhook, you have to put a title, you have to put a link, and I've put the one that I had in Make.com and just copied and pasted it. And then you can just set the content type if you wanted to. That's a little bit technical, but you can leave everything by default. You can test it and create it. So I've done this already. I've created one called ClickUp Archive Task that is basically gonna fire each time I add that tag called archive. So this is the very first step. Create your webhook in ClickUp and find the trigger that works for you, have it fire a webhook, and then click save. So once that automation is set up, what we're gonna do is get back to make.com, and from there, we don't have to look at ClickUp for a while. We're gonna have to understand the logic of what we're doing in make.com to make this magic happen. So first thing we're gonna do, when we receive information, when ClickUp tells us basically, hey, this task has been archived, what we're gonna do is get the whole task info so that we understand what are the dependencies. So let's get back here. So basically what we wanna know whenever tasks B get archived is, number one, task B archived, what was it blocking, and then what was it blocked by? These are the two information we need to know. We just basically need to create little groups of the waiting on and of the blocking tasks. So this is what these two first branches are for, is to find the waiting on tasks. This is to find the blocking tasks. And this is to create the rescheduling. So as soon as we know what it was waiting on, what it was blocking, so back here, as soon as we find out C and D and we found out task A, we're capable already of linking A to C and D. But in the very last step, what we're gonna do is reschedule. So basically set the start date to the start date of task B and set the due date to the difference, if we get here, the difference between the due date and the start date of the initial task, so that it's basically a move, a translation. So I'm gonna show you step by step how to do this. Step one, let's figure out the tasks waiting on. We are here and we have this branch. So this branch basically is gonna iterate. We're gonna have a filter here. And this filter says, filter the tasks waiting on the deleted or the archived tasks. Why are we using archived and not deleted, by the way? Because if we delete a task in ClickUp and it fires an event, we're not gonna get that task info. So it needs to be archived first. I'm gonna show you in the very end that we actually delete that task that has triggered the automation here, but we're not gonna do that for now. So we're gonna filter the task waiting on the deleted task, and the filter is, let's iterate over the dependencies. So this is an object of all the dependencies of task B, okay? And then let's create a group of all the task IDs that are waiting on. And waiting on is basically an operation of finding the dependencies that are not equal to the initial dependencies of the task that has been archived. This is a little bit like technical and tricky, but it's basically what the ClickUp API object responds, and we're gonna figure out wherever the task ID that we iterate on in the dependencies is not equal to the task ID of the archived tasks. What this gives us is a list, okay? And this list, we're gonna bring it here. We're gonna create a group of all the tasks waiting on the deleted task. So if we get here, we're gonna create a list of C and D and E, F, G, H, whatever we want if there were other links, other arrows, other dependencies. So if we get to ClickUp, basically it's gonna create a list. So if we have get social media logins and it's linked to Meta Ad Setup and to Google Ad Setup, if this gets deleted, it's gonna create a list of those two. So this is what this first branch does. Again, quite technical, don't have to understand, remember everything, but it's just like to get you to understand how I decipher an automation, how I build it, how I think it through, how I use diagrams like this to make my ideas clear, and then get to make.com and set it up. Now, branch number two, we're gonna figure out what were the blocked tasks. Same principle, pretty easy. We're gonna iterate over the dependencies, again, exactly the same as what we did above, except this time, we're gonna have a difference between the depends on task ID object and the task ID object, where here we had the difference between the task ID object and the initial task ID object. So this is just, again, a very subtle difference of what the ClickUp API gives us as data. So we just use a different operator. The depends on task ID object that is in the API response. So it's this one, it's inside of this, the depends on task ID object, okay, different one. And here it's the task ID object. So if we get in the dependencies, it's this very first one. Quite technical, you don't need to remember that, but this is what this filter does. So it brings only the blocking tasks. And then what it does is it calls out this C and D. So basically it's first gonna figure out, hey, we have task A, and then it's gonna call C and D from here. It's gonna say, hey, we have C and D. So now we have to make a link. Let's make a link here and create those two links. If we get here, that's what this does it. It creates the links. It sets the task to block. So it creates dependency between the object of the depends on and the task ID response. And this is just an error catcher. It's a detail because sometimes there's runtime errors that are related to empty task ID object. I just put it here, but you might not need it. Now that's it for the first two branches. First, figuring out the waiting on task. Second, figuring out the blocking task. And then creating the link between blocking and waiting on. So creating the little arrows we have here, basically virtually, of course. And then third step is going to be scheduling. Now, I had a bit of a difficulty for this one, for scheduling tasks, but the principle is fairly simple. If we get to this diagram, I'm going to explain it further. We have basically done the most important so far. We have linked A to C and D, which is beautiful. But what the problem is that C and D, if we don't do anything, they will remain there. And there is a little time gap that is interesting here, that little time span that we have here, okay, a few days. That was basically the time of task B. That gap we want to close because there's less tasks to do. So potentially this project can continue earlier. Let's take the start date of task B. Let's take the start date of C and D, and let's bring C and D to the start date of task B and subtract the difference so that the due date is also moved as well. Otherwise, it will be like this if we don't move the due date. So we need to bring it like this so that the duration of this is exactly the same as the duration of this. So what this third branch does is exactly that. Quite technical again, but fairly understandable once you get the logic, right? So what this does is it recovers that first object of C and D. So like I said, start date, due date. Then we are going to iterate over C and D. We're going to get their start date and due date because we need this for calculation later. And here we're going to do something quite advanced. So we're going to reschedule those dates. We are going to say start date is start date of the object 3 and the object 3 is actually this one. It's actually the archived task. Start date is the start date of the task B, virtual task B, or archived task. And due date is start date of task B plus the difference between initial due date and initial start date, so that we have the exact same gap happening for the due date. So this is basically a formula of make.com. It adds days between that difference. It parses the number between the due date and the start date, and then it divides by a certain amount of milliseconds because ClickUp returns the data in milliseconds. And then it basically constructs a date with that difference. And then we click save, and that's it. We're done. We've done the automation. Now, one very first step is that we go to ClickUp and delete that task that was archived. Why do we want to do this? Because the archiving process was just for this automation to work and fire. But once we archived it, it means we don't really need it. So just to clean up ClickUp a little bit and not have a big legacy of archived tasks lingering around in your workspace, we just delete them automatically, programmatically through make.com. That's what this last bubble is for. Now, what this means is that my automation catches the waiting on, catches the blocking task, links them together here, and then reschedules the waiting on tasks. Now let's get to ClickUp, and this basically is waiting for the event to fire, for the archive tag to fire. So we have several tasks here, a bunch of tasks, cool. I'm gonna use, again, the tag, but you don't have to necessarily. You could use a status if you wanted to. You could use something else. It can't be task deletion. If you deleted the task, it will not happen. The automation will not happen, but you could use a status. So let's take this example. We have a set of tasks here, and they all have like start dates, due dates are happening at certain times. And we have, say, this one, account audit. What I would want Let's move it here actually. What I would want if account audit gets deleted is that choose content themes starts on the 12th of March, right? Takes the start date of account audit. And that there's a little arrow that links them both automatically. So what I'm gonna do to test if this works is open up the task, set it to the archive tag, and then that's it. All I have to do is wait. So I'm gonna leave this, and as you can see, a link has been made, and it's starting on March 12th. So the automation just fired, and it automatically scheduled the start date, the due date, and the dependency of the new connection. Let's see, other example. We have set posting schedule. Let's actually leave this, make sure it's firing each time now. Okay, so we have set posting schedule, and then I'm gonna archive it. Let's leave this. This should be deleted by ClickUp in a few seconds. I mean, by our automation. So you see that happened. And then there should be a link built up between those. Now, if we get back here, as you can see, the automation fired. It just magically went through everything. And if we get here and I refresh my screen, we will have the link up happening between those tasks. So again, choose content themes, and we have the arrow, and that's amazing. Let's try it one last time, just so that I show you how it looks in make.com. Choose content themes. Let's archive this one, set it to archive. And here it's gonna basically listen to that event happening. As you can see, boom, boom, boom. All of this is happening. Back to ClickUp. Task is not here anymore. And refresh my screen. Again, like sometimes ClickUp doesn't display the data in real time, so we have to refresh it. And boom, we have competition research directly linked to weekly monitoring. So we have everything being rescheduled automatically. Each time you archive a task, you decide it's not part of this project, it's not relevant anymore, then we delete it, and ClickUp takes care of rescheduling, reconnecting the dependencies, and it's magical. This might be useful in like a 9-task project, but you might think that's a little bit overkill for 9 tasks. I could do all of that manually. But think of your agency, your business having 100 clients, very similar projects, about 10, 20 tasks per project. Things starting to become very complex, but sometimes not all the tasks are applicable. If you were to set up an automation like this, it can definitely save you hours and hours of rescheduling, reprogramming, reconnecting dependencies in ClickUp. Now, obviously, you can do this yourself, and there's a lot of inspo in this video. I've showed you how the automation works in Make and the concepts behind it, and you can probably set it up yourself. But to make sure you don't make any mistakes, and if you want to leverage Make and make any other further automations, whether connecting ClickUp with other tools, leveraging AI to have little AI agents working in ClickUp workspace, creating content for you, iterating, creating ideas for you, there's thousands of use cases really of automating your ClickUp. So if you're interested about that, just book a discovery call with us. We'll get through your need, get to understand how we can help you save time, make your business flow better, and then we'll give you a proposal to how we can help you set up automations in your ClickUp workspace. I hope that inspired you, and I'll see you next time. Until then, stay productive.